This is Overheard Nation, where America's forgotten secrets come to light. Ready to uncover the truth?
The victory celebrations of World War II faded, replaced by the chilling quiet of a new kind of conflict. The Cold War descended upon America, and with it came a pervasive, creeping fear. The enemy was no longer a uniformed soldier across an ocean. It was an invisible ideology, a whisper of communism that could be anywhere and in anyone. This fear became a weapon, and men like Robert Vanderbilt were eager to wield it. From his position of immense power, Robert saw the national mood of paranoia as a tool. He became a vocal supporter of the new anti-communist crusades, using his influence and connections to help target any suspicious elements. For him, this was a convenient banner under which to continue his old war. Labor unions, workers' rights advocates, and champions for minorities all were easily branded as un-American, their calls for justice painted as subversive plots. In protecting his business interests, he convinced himself he was protecting the free world. Thomas Campbell, the war hero and tireless advocate for veterans and laborers, found himself on the wrong side of this new, invisible front line. His work with the unions, once seen as a noble fight for the common man, now cast a shadow of suspicion over him. He was monitored. His past associations were scrutinized. The very system he had fought a war to defend now saw him as a potential enemy within. He felt trapped, his patriotism questioned, and his freedom constrained by a system that demanded absolute conformity. This forced him to reconsider what liberty truly meant. Anna Vanderbilt watched this new wave of injustice with growing horror. Seeing the cynical manipulation of national fear, she became more active and more public in her advocacy than ever before. She used her fortune and her name to provide legal defense for artists, intellectuals, and labor organizers who were unjustly accused. Her conflict with her brother Robert escalated from a private disagreement into a public battle of ideologies, often played out in the columns of newspapers. She understood that the true threat to freedom was not an external enemy, but the internal intolerance her brother so willingly exploited. She often asked herself if a nation could truly be free if it was so afraid of its own citizens.
The mid-20th century saw new battle lines drawn across America, not by soldiers, but by ordinary citizens in the streets. The civil rights movement gathered momentum, a powerful wave of protests against racial segregation and systemic injustice crashing against the old order. Marches filled the cities, and new, determined voices rose up, demanding the equality that had long been denied. An aging Thomas Campbell, though weary from his own battles, found a renewed sense of purpose in this movement. He saw in the fight for civil rights a direct continuation of his own lifelong struggle for the dignity of the common man. He attended rallies and offered his quiet support, recognizing the familiar courage in the eyes of the young activists. His sister, Elizabeth, also became an active participant in the era's social change, championing the growing movement for women's rights. Having experienced independence and purpose while working in the factories during the war, she watched with frustration as society attempted to push women back into purely domestic roles. She fought for equal opportunities and economic independence, seeing the fight for gender equality and racial equality as two sides of the same coin. Robert Vanderbilt, from the pinnacle of his financial empire, tried to ignore these societal shifts. He saw the protests and marches not as a call for justice, but a descent into chaos that threatened the stable foundations of his world. But the world was changing whether he approved or not. His companies began to face organized boycotts and protests over their discriminatory practices, and for the first time, the pressure from the streets began to affect his bottom line. He was being forced to acknowledge a new power that he could not simply suppress. Meanwhile, Anna Vanderbilt fully embraced the cause. She used her considerable wealth and influence to actively support the civil rights movement, providing funding for activists and legal aid for protesters. She became a crucial bridge between two worlds, leveraging the privilege of her name to fight for the powerless. She believed deeply that America could and must become a better, more just nation. She knew the price of this struggle for equality would be high, and she wondered who ultimately would be forced to pay it.
The late 20th century ushered in a cultural revolution that swept across America. A new generation, born into a world of unprecedented prosperity and technological change, began to question the very values their parents and grandparents had fought for. The old certainties of work, family, and nation were no longer taken for granted. This was a new world of searching, of questioning, and of profound social change. The grandchildren of John and Sarah Campbell were children of this new era. They lived in a world their ancestors could not have imagined, a world of suburbs and television, a world without the grueling toil of the farm. Yet they faced new challenges. Theirs was not a struggle for survival, but a search for identity and meaning in a landscape of mass consumerism. They were disconnected from the soil that had defined their family, and they wrestled with what it meant to be a Campbell in a world that no longer valued the old ways. An elderly Robert Vanderbilt watched these cultural shifts with a deep sense of bewilderment and alienation. His industrial empire was still vast, a monument to his ruthless ambition, but he felt increasingly obsolete. In this new world, with its new values of social consciousness and anti-materialism, his immense wealth no longer commanded the absolute respect it once did. He saw his own legacy, once a source of immense pride, being re-examined and questioned by a generation that did not share his reverence for power and profit. In contrast, his sister, Anna,
also elderly but filled with an unyielding energy, found herself more relevant than ever. She embraced the new movements for social and environmental justice, seeing them as a continuation of her life's work. She used her platform and resources to support a new generation of activists, trying to pass on the lessons she had learned through a lifetime of fighting for the disenfranchised. She often reflected on the immense changes she had witnessed, seeing how old battles for justice were simply taking on new forms for a new time. This era of great change posed a difficult question to them all, and to the nation itself. In a world that was transforming so rapidly, what from the past was worth preserving, and what needed to be left behind to make way for a new, uncertain future?
The new millennium dawned, and with it came the final fading of the old world. The last members of the senior generations of the Campbell and Vanderbilt families passed away, leaving behind their complex and heavy legacies. On the edge of the ever-expanding city, the old Campbell farm, a small green island that had survived the Depression and the age of industry, now faced its greatest threat: suburban development. The land, once valued for its soil, was now valued for its real estate potential. For John Campbell's grandchildren, this new value presented a profound dilemma. They were generations removed from the toil of the earth. To them, the farm was less a sacred trust and more of a burden, a relic of a past they barely understood. The choice before them was stark: sell the land to developers and secure a life of immense wealth and comfort, or preserve the heritage of their ancestors, a heritage of struggle and principle that felt increasingly distant. In the polished boardrooms of the Vanderbilt empire, a similar, though mirrored, crisis of legacy was unfolding. Robert Vanderbilt's grandchildren were forced to confront the true nature of their inheritance. They saw that their family name was a global symbol not only of immense wealth and power, but also of ruthless exploitation. This created a rift between them. One grandson, ambitious and pragmatic, sought to continue the work of his predecessors, believing in the unyielding power of capital. But his cousin, inspired by the quiet philanthropy of her great-aunt Anna, felt a deep need to atone for the sins of the past, to use their vast fortune for charity and social redemption. And so, the stories of the two families were destined to intersect one final time. The development corporation seeking to buy the Campbell farm was, in fact, a subsidiary of the modern Vanderbilt empire, led by the ambitious grandson. The decision to sell or preserve the land would not be made between a farmer and an agent, but between the descendants of the original conflict. It was to be a meeting of two generations, two worldviews, and two Americas, each forced to decide how to reckon with their shared, complicated past. This final chapter became a search for meaning, a re-evaluation of all that had come before, posing the ultimate question of how we choose to manage the legacies we inherit.
The final confrontation, then, was not one of machines against men, but of memory against money. The fate of the Campbell farm remained undecided, a symbol of a nation at a crossroads. One path led to its preservation. The land could be saved, transformed into a public park or an educational center, a living monument to the struggle to preserve history and nature against the tide of development. It could become a place to remember. The other path led to its erasure. The farm could be sold, its fields paved over, its history flattened into just another tract of valuable real estate. Its story could be swallowed by the very progress it had resisted for so long, and the last echo of the Campbells' quiet defiance could be silenced forever. A similar choice faced the Vanderbilt descendants. They could use their immense wealth to forge a new legacy, one of true progress. They could invest in sustainable development and social programs, using their power to heal the very wounds their family had helped create, finally redeeming the family name. Or they could continue to live by the old rules, perpetuating the cycle of wealth and power, proving that the lessons of the past had not truly been learned. In the end, the story of these two families becomes a timeless allegory for America itself. It forces us to ask what the American dream truly is. Does it change with each passing generation? Or is there something immutable in the simple human striving for a better life, for freedom, for dignity, and for justice? The finale, then, is not an ending, but an open question left for the viewer. It asks which path we, as a society, will choose for our own future. It asks what we will choose to build and what we are willing to sacrifice, and what role each of us will play in the quiet, epic battle between the enduring spirit of the land and the unyielding might of progress.
The world is full of forgotten stories, and even more shocking secrets await you. Subscribe to Overheard Nation,